Store Karen tried to ban Judge Judy from the store. 20 minutes later, she was cleaning out her desk. The afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Meridian Boutique, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors where luxury handbags sat like crown jewels, behind gleaming glass displays. It was the kind of place where silence carried weight, where every footstep whispered against imported Italian stone, and where the air itself seemed to cost more than most people's weekly groceries. Judge Judy Scheindlin pushed through the heavy brass doors, the familiar chime announcing her arrival to a world that had no idea it was about to witness something extraordinary. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. She wasn't the Judge Judy the cameras knew. Gone was the black robe that had struck fear into the hearts of litigants for decades. Instead, she wore a simple navy blazer and crisp white blouse, her silver hair catching the afternoon light as she moved with the measured confidence of someone who had spent 30 years making life-altering decisions before most people finished their morning coffee. Her eyes, those legendary eyes that had seen through every lie, every excuse, every attempt at manipulation, scanned the boutique with the same analytical precision she brought to her courtroom. But today, she wasn't looking for deception. She was looking for the perfect gift for her granddaughter's graduation. A simple gesture of love that should have taken 20 minutes and left everyone's day unchanged. The irony was thick enough to cut with a gavel. Here was a woman who had built her career on recognizing character, on seeing through facades and calling out those who abused whatever small power they'd been given. A woman who had made her fortune by refusing to let anyone talk down to her, who had turned respect into a currency more valuable than money. And she was about to walk into a situation that would test every lesson she'd ever taught, every principle she'd ever stood for, in ways she never could have anticipated. Judge Judy's fingers traced the edge of a leather handbag, her mind already calculating quality, craftsmanship, the kind of attention to detail that separated the worthy from the worthless. She'd always believed that how you treated people when you thought no one was watching revealed everything about your character. How you handled power when you thought you were untouchable showed who you really were beneath the uniform, beneath the title, beneath the mask of professionalism. She was about to discover that some people wore their masks so long they forgot there was a face underneath. If you've ever wondered what happens when someone mistakes one of the most powerful judges in America for just another difficult customer, make sure you're subscribed, because this story will show you exactly why assumptions can destroy everything you've worked for in a single moment. Hit that notification bell because what you're about to witness is a masterclass in how respect should never be taken for granted, and why you should never underestimate the quiet person examining merchandise in the corner. The boutique hummed with the kind of manufactured tranquility that expensive stores cultivated. The soft jazz floating from hidden speakers, the gentle whisper of climate control maintaining the perfect temperature for both customers and merchandise. Judge Judy moved through the space like she moved through life, deliberately, purposefully, with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect she commanded. She paused at a display of silk scarves, her mind drifting to memories of her granddaughter's laugh, the way the young woman's eyes lit up when she talked about her future plans. This should have been simple, a grandmother shopping for someone she loved. A successful woman supporting a business with her patronage, a routine transaction that left everyone satisfied, and the world spinning exactly as it had before. But in the back corner of the store, behind a register that gleamed like a throne, someone was watching. Someone whose day was about to take a turn that would make Judge Judy's most dramatic courtroom moments look like a gentle conversation over tea. Someone who was about to learn that the person you dismissed today might be the person who holds your tomorrow in their hands. Sharon Kellaway had been watching from her perch, behind the mahogany counter for exactly 7 minutes and 43 seconds, her manicured fingers drumming against the leather-bound appointment book like a predator marking time. At 46, Sharon had perfected the art of looking busy while doing nothing, her blonde highlights catching the boutique's carefully orchestrated lighting as her eyes tracked every movement of the woman in the navy blazer. 15 years in retail had taught her to read customers like a poker player reads tells, and everything about this particular shopper screamed trouble to her increasingly paranoid mind. Sharon had built her identity around being the gatekeeper of Meridian Boutique, the final authority between the merchandise and the masses who thought they deserved to touch it. She'd started as a sales associate fresh out of community college, back when she still believed customer service meant serving customers. But years of dealing with returns, complaints, and what she perceived as entitled behavior had calcified her heart into something harder than the diamonds locked in the store's vault. She'd climbed her way to manager not through excellence but through attrition, outlasting colleagues who burned out from her passive-aggressive warfare and her talent for making mountains out of molehills. The woman by the scarves was taking too long, touching too much, examining everything with the kind of scrutiny that Sharon had learned to interpret as either shoplifting reconnaissance or the prelude to an impossible-to-satisfy complaint. Sharon's internal alarm system, finely tuned by years of retail paranoia, was screaming that this customer was going to be a problem. The way she held each item, the way she checked seams and examined labels, the methodical manner in which she moved through the displays, it all spelled trouble in Sharon's narrow worldview. Judge Judy, completely unaware she was being psychoanalyzed by someone whose greatest achievement was implementing a new inventory system, continued her careful examination of a silk scarf that reminded her of her granddaughter's favorite colors. Her fingers traced the delicate pattern, her mind calculating not just the price but the joy it might bring, the memory it might create. She'd learned long ago that the most meaningful gifts weren't always the most expensive, but they were always chosen with intention, with care, with the kind of attention to detail that separated love from obligation. Sharon's patience, never her strongest virtue, finally snapped. She pushed herself away from the counter with the dramatic flair of someone who believed her every movement was being watched and admired, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Her approach was calculated to intimidate, the kind of theatrical authority she'd perfected through years of trying to compensate for feeling powerless in every other aspect of her life. She discovered that customers, like wild animals, could smell fear, but they could also be cowed by confidence, even confidence that was nothing more than costume jewelry worn over insecurity. "Excuse me," Sharon announced, her voice carrying the kind of artificial sweetness that barely concealed the vinegar underneath. She positioned herself at the perfect distance to invade Judge Judy's personal space without quite touching her, a technique she'd mastered for maximum psychological effect. "I noticed you've been examining our merchandise quite thoroughly. Is there something specific you're looking for today?" Judge Judy looked up from the scarf, her legendary eyes meeting Sharon's for the first time, and for a brief moment Sharon felt something flutter in her chest, a recognition that didn't quite reach her conscious mind. But Sharon had spent so long building walls around her intuition that she dismissed the feeling as quickly as it arrived, chalking it up to the kind of nervousness that difficult customers always triggered. "I'm shopping for a graduation gift," Judge Judy replied, her voice carrying the same measured tone she used to calm nervous witnesses, completely unaware that Sharon had already cast her as the villain in a drama that existed only in Sharon's head. "Your scarves are beautiful. The craftsmanship is exceptional." But Sharon heard what she wanted to hear, filtered through years of retail cynicism and customer service trauma. Compliments were often preludes to complaints. Careful examination meant preparation for returns. Politeness was usually a mask for entitled behavior that would reveal itself the moment something didn't go exactly as the customer expected. "Yes. Well, our pieces are quite exclusive," Sharon replied, her tone shifting subtly toward territorial, like a museum guard addressing someone who'd gotten too close to a priceless painting. "We cater to a very specific clientele who appreciates luxury without requiring extensive examination." The words hung in the air between them like smoke, the insult wrapped in boutique speak but unmistakable in its intent. Judge Judy's eyebrows raised almost imperceptibly, a reaction that in her courtroom would have signaled to experienced attorneys that they were about to step on a landmine. But Sharon, drunk on her own perceived authority, missed the warning entirely. Sharon's confidence grew like a toxic plant fed by silence, interpreting Judge Judy's measured pause as submission, rather than the calm before a storm that anyone who'd spent 5 minutes in her courtroom would have recognized immediately. The manager straightened her shoulders, puffing herself up like a porcupine preparing for battle, her voice taking on the authoritative edge she reserved for what she considered problem customers. "I'm going to need to see some identification before you handle any more merchandise," Sharon announced, her words dropping into the boutique's refined atmosphere like a rock through stained glass. It was a policy that existed only in her head, born from years of power fantasies and retail paranoia, but she delivered it with the confidence of someone citing federal law. Judge Judy's hand, still holding the silk scarf, went perfectly still, her head tilted slightly to the right, a gesture that had preceded some of the most devastating cross-examinations in television history. "I'm sorry, what?" she asked, her voice carrying the kind of dangerous quiet that seasoned attorneys learned to fear. "Store policy," Sharon lied smoothly, doubling down on her fabricated authority with the skill of someone who'd been bending truth to fit convenience for years. "For expensive items, we require identification to ensure our customers can afford what they're touching." The insult landed like a slap, but Judge Judy absorbed it with the grace of someone who'd weathered far worse storms than a delusional retail manager drunk on imaginary power. Her legendary composure held firm, but behind her eyes, the wheels of justice were already turning, calculating, measuring Sharon's actions against the scales of professional conduct and basic human decency. That's an interesting policy, Judge Judy replied, her tone so neutral it was almost clinical. I'd like to speak with your owner about it. The words were a lifeline, a chance for Sharon to step back from the cliff she was approaching, but Sharon was too intoxicated by her own perceived dominance to recognize the offer for what it was. The owner isn't here, and I have full authority to enforce store policies, Sharon snapped, her voice rising just enough to catch the attention of other shoppers who began turning their heads like wildlife-sensing predators. If you can't comply with simple requests, perhaps this isn't the right store for you. Judge Judy set the scarf down with the careful precision of someone placing evidence in a courtroom, her movements deliberate and controlled. 30 years of dealing with litigants who thought they could intimidate her had taught her that the loudest voices usually belonged to the weakest minds, and Sharon was proving that theorem with every syllable. Ma'am, Judge Judy said, her voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume to command attention, I suggest you reconsider your approach. It was a warning wrapped in politeness, a final opportunity for Sharon to recognize she was steering directly into an iceberg that would sink more than just her afternoon. But Sharon, blinded by retail righteousness and years of unchecked small-scale tyranny, heard only defiance where she expected surrender, her face flushed with the kind of anger that comes from having your authority questioned by someone you've already dismissed as beneath you. That's it, Sharon declared, her voice now loud enough to echo off the boutique's expensive walls. I'm officially banning you from this store. You need to leave immediately or I'm calling security. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, sealing Sharon's fate with the finality of a judge's gavel. She had no idea she'd just declared war on one of the most formidable legal minds in America. The boutique fell silent except for the soft jazz that now sounded like a funeral dirge. Every other customer frozen in place like witnesses to a car accident they couldn't look away from. Sharon stood there, chest heaving with righteous indignation, waiting for Judge Judy to slink away in defeat like every other customer she'd bullied over the years. But Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she did something that sent ice through Sharon's veins. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile or a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who'd just watched their opponent walk directly into a trap of their own making. The expression of a predator who'd been patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Judge Judy reached into her purse with the deliberate care of a surgeon selecting an instrument, her movements so controlled they seemed choreographed. You want to see identification? Judge Judy asked, her voice carrying a strange new energy that made the hair on Sharon's arm stand up without her understanding why. She pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal not just a driver's license, but a business card that caught the boutique's expensive lighting like a beacon. Sharon's eyes fell on the card, and for a moment, her brain refused to process what she was seeing. The seal of the Superior Court of California. The name printed in bold professional letters. The Honorable Judge Judith Scheindlin. And below that, in smaller text that might as well have been written in fire, Television's Judge Judy. Oh, God, Sharon whispered, the words escaping her lips like air from a punctured balloon. The color drained from her face so quickly she looked like she might faint. Her hand instinctively reaching for the counter to steady herself as the full magnitude of her mistake crashed over her like a tsunami. Judge Judy watched Sharon's recognition dawn with the patience of someone who'd witnessed this exact moment of realization thousands of times in her courtroom, that precise instant when a defendant realized they just confessed to something they could never take back. That's Judge Judy to you, she said, her voice now carrying the full weight of 3 decades of judicial authority. The boutique erupted in whispers as other customers finally connected the dots, smartphones appearing like magic as people realized they were witnessing something that would be trending on social media within minutes. Sharon stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, her earlier confidence evaporating faster than expensive perfume in desert heat. Can you imagine the look on Karen's face when she realized she'd just tried to ban one of America's most famous judges from a store? If you're enjoying this instant karma story, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in Judge Judy's shoes. I didn't, Sharon stammered, but Judge Judy held up a hand with the authority of someone who'd silenced courtrooms full of arguing attorneys. No, Judge Judy said, her voice now carrying the full power that had made her a household name. You didn't think. And that's exactly the problem. The chime of the boutique's door announced the arrival of Michael Chen, the owner, who'd been summoned by a frantic text from his assistant manager, witnessing the confrontation from across the store. He walked through the door expecting to mediate a routine customer complaint. But the scene that greeted him was his absolute worst nightmare come to life. Judge Judy stood in the center of his boutique like the eye of a hurricane, surrounded by gawking customers with their phones out, while his store manager looked like she'd just been struck by lightning. Michael's face went white as recognition hit him instantly. He'd watched Judge Judy's show religiously, had even used her quotes in staff meetings about fairness and accountability. "Your Honor," Michael breathed, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached with the reverence usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. "I'm so incredibly sorry. Whatever happened here, please know it doesn't represent my business or my values." Sharon found her voice, desperation making her bold. "Michael," she was being difficult, examining everything, asking too many questions. "I was just following protocol." "What protocol?" Michael's voice cut through her excuses like a blade, his eyes blazing with a fury Sharon had never seen before. "The protocol where we humiliate customers? The protocol where we demand ID for shopping? There is no such protocol, Sharon." Judge Judy watched the exchange with the clinical interest of someone who'd observed hundreds of similar breakdowns in her courtroom. "Your manager banned me from your store," she said simply, letting the words hang in the air like an executioner's sentence. Michael's head snapped toward Sharon, disbelief and horror warring across his features. "You did what?" His voice cracked with the weight of realizing his reputation was disintegrating in real time. She wouldn't comply with..." Sharon's words trailed off as she finally understood that every excuse she offered only dug her grave deeper. "You're fired," Michael said, the words falling like a judge's gavel. "Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out." He turned back to Judge Judy, his hands shaking. "Your Honor, I cannot begin to express how mortified I am." Sharon stood there, watching 15 years of retail tyranny collapse in 15 seconds, finally understanding that actions have consequences and some mistakes can never be undone. Within hours, the story had spread across social media like wildfire, with hashtags like Judge Judy's Karen and Retail Karma Justice trending nationwide. The video footage captured by bystanders showed every devastating moment of Sharon's meltdown. From her arrogant demands to her mortified realization, to her final walk of shame past the very customer she'd spent years intimidating. The internet, with its infinite appetite for justice served cold, devoured every frame Judge Judy, never one to let a teachable moment slip by, used her platform to address the deeper issues the incident had exposed. "This wasn't about me being recognized," she explained in interviews that week. "This was about a pattern of behavior that happens every day to people who don't have cameras rolling." How many customers has Sharon treated this way? How many people have been humiliated, dismissed, or banned from stores simply because someone on a power trip decided they didn't belong? The ripple effects spread far beyond one boutique in Beverly Hills. Retail workers across the country began sharing their own stories of managers who'd turned customer service into customer persecution, who'd confused authority with authoritarianism. Training consultants found themselves fielding calls from store owners suddenly concerned about their staff's approach to customer relations. Michael Chen didn't stop at firing Sharon. He implemented comprehensive retraining for his entire staff, brought in customer service experts, and established clear protocols that emphasized respect and professionalism. "Judge Judy taught me that you can't build a luxury brand on the foundation of making people feel small," he told reporters. "True luxury is making every customer feel valued, regardless of how they look or what you think they can afford." But perhaps the most powerful impact came from the conversations the incident sparked. Parents used Sharon's downfall to teach their children about treating service workers with respect. Managers in industries far beyond retail began examining their own practices, asking themselves whether they were building up their teams or creating little tyrants drunk on borrowed authority. Sharon herself became a cautionary tale, her name forever linked to the consequences of unchecked arrogance. Job interviews became exercises in explaining her viral moment of poor judgment, each potential employer having already seen the footage that ended her retail career in spectacular fashion. The boutique thrived under its new culture of genuine respect, proving that treating customers with dignity wasn't just the right thing to do, it was good business. Judge Judy's granddaughter eventually received her graduation gift from Meridian Boutique, purchased during a return visit, where every staff member treated the judge with the respect she'd always deserved, not because of her fame, but because that's how every customer should be treated. 3 months later, Judge Judy walked back into Meridian Boutique, this time greeted by name and treated with the warmth reserved for valued customers. Michael personally assisted her, sharing how the incident had transformed not just his business but his entire approach to leadership. The boutique now thrived with a culture where respect flowed both ways, to customers and from customers to staff. Sharon's replacement, Maria, had been trained in the new protocols that emphasized dignity over dominance. The store's reviews had skyrocketed, with customers praising the genuine hospitality they encountered. What had started as one woman's power trip had inadvertently created a blueprint for how retail should operate. Judge Judy purchased the silk scarf that had started it all, wrapping it for her granddaughter with the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the universe delivers justice in the most unexpected ways. As she left the store, she reflected on a truth she'd learned over decades on the bench. Respect isn't earned through fear or intimidation. It's built through consistency, fairness, and treating every person as if their dignity matters. The lesson wasn't just about recognizing celebrities or avoiding viral embarrassment. It was about recognizing humanity itself. Every person who walks through your door, whether it's a store, an office, or your own home, deserves basic respect regardless of what you think they can afford or contribute. You don't need a gavel or a TV show to stand up for what's right. Share this video if you believe in treating people with dignity, no matter who you think they are. Remember, in Judge Judy's own words, beauty fades, dumb is forever. But respect and kindness never go out of style. What's your take on this situation? Let me know in the comments below, and remember, you never know who's watching when you think no one important is around.